Sports Talk Chicago. Remember Jon Zaghloul, and we are back and ready for today's special guest. He's the Bears beat writer for the Chicago Tribune, host of the Take the North podcast, and a contributor to 670 The Score. Please welcome Dan Wiederer to the program. Dan, it's great to have you on. How are you?
John, always good to talk to you. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for being here. What do you make of that Bears-Giants game first off?
It's sort of a snapshot of what the next 3 months of our Bears experience is going to be, right? It's a team that is under-talented, underperforming, and is going to lose some ugly games throughout the year. And what we all knew coming into this was going to be a real rebuild year. I think most discouraging about the loss, John, was that the Giants were so beat up, right? They came into the game missing so many key players, and then they lost up to, I think, 8 guys in that game that left the game with injuries, and the Bears still couldn't take advantage of a depleted team and get on the right side of the scoreboard. To leave New York without scoring a touchdown is just another sort of piece of evidence piled on to the fact that this passing game is broken and that they can't get their young quarterback unlocked. And so here we are, right? Yes, the Bears are 2-2, but yes, we all know what we're seeing with our eyes as well.
Who's most to blame for their passing game issues?
I think there's so much blame to be distributed that it's really hard to just try to single one person out. I know that sort of the knee-jerk reaction in Chicago is when the offense is failing, the first thing you do is you point right at the coordinator and you skewer the play calls, and you skewer the scheme, and you say that guy's a bum. But when you look through the video of that game a second and third time, and you see the number of plays that are there to be made that are malfunctioning because of player execution error, right? Sometimes it's the protection just breaking down completely. Like the ball that Justin fumbled is going to be a big game, right? It's a well-designed play that is executed well by the tight end and the receiver, and Equanimeous St. Brown is uncovered on a crossing route, and Justin needs about 3/4 more of a second to be able to get that ball off. Instead, Braxton Jones and Sam Mustipher get beat. His right arm gets hit. It's a fumble. They lose the ball. The Giants turn it into a touchdown, right? This is how bad teams lose football games. But sometimes it's the protection. Sometimes the receivers aren't getting open. Sometimes things are unfolding the way they should, and Justin just isn't reacting quick enough or with the right decision. And so you've got this all-encompassing failure that they need to get figured out, because this is going to be a long, long year if this is the type of offense that we're subject to from now through January.
Why is the pass protection just so mediocre?
Well, look, I mean, you're starting a rookie 5th-round pick at the most important position on the line. Sam Mustipher has been starting for you at center for the entire season because Lucas Patrick suffered an injury in training camp. Now Cody Whitehair is gone for at least a month, probably longer, with his knee injury. And so you just don't have the horses up front. And so when you don't have the horses up front, you've got to plan around that. And they did leave a back and a tight end in for pass protection a lot against the Giants, and it still didn't hold up. And the Giants sent a lot of different blitz looks at Justin Fields, and they couldn't handle them all. And they just had never established sort of the consistency offensively that gives you the rhythm, that then gives you the confidence, that then allows you to score points.
How much has all this affected Justin Fields' performance and his development this season?
This is the long-term worry, and I'm hopeful that they can get this figured out here in the month of October, because if Justin starts developing bad habits because of all the things that are going on around him, that is a lot of times really difficult for a young quarterback to break, right? And that's where, good quarterbacks with potential suddenly hit this steep slope of regression, and they never recover from it, right? And so that's why we're at this danger zone with Justin in his development right now, in trying to hope that he can retain sort of that mental fortitude, that trust, that confidence, even when it's not even warranted, right? You've got to, as a starting quarterback in this league, sort of trick yourself into believing, okay, I'm protected. I'm going to stand back here. And even if I take a shot to the jaw on this play, I'm going to stand back here and make the throw I'm supposed to make. And so there's a lot that comes into this where they have to be very careful at making sure they don't put Justin on that steep slide that I think most of Chicago is worried about. And I think, John, that's where this conversation has gotten so heated and passionate this week, is that I think people's biggest worry is still in front of their eyes, and they haven't been able to push it to the side and say, oh, we don't have to worry about that. And the biggest worry for Chicago Bears fans is that Justin Fields ain't it. And if Justin Fields ain't it, a already demanding rebuild gets that much harder.
And you're saying blasphemy here. You can't be saying that Justin Fields may not be it. I mean, there have been a lot of arguments about that this week, but I think it's a warranted point to make.
Yeah. I mean, look, like you have to prove to us that you are it, right? And Justin now has gone 3 consecutive games without a touchdown pass, right? He hasn't had 12 completions in a game this season. We all said there was a monsoon in week 1, throw out the passing game stats from week 1. Well, that's the only game in which he has thrown a touchdown pass, right? Was in a monsoon. He threw 2 of them. Hasn't had one since, right? So they've had 36 drives since they last put the ball in the end zone via the forward pass, right? Like this isn't Red Grange's team anymore that we're talking about. So let's get that thing unlocked. Let's try to get the young kid some confidence. And then maybe when he comes to his weekly news conference on Wednesday, he doesn't have that hangdog look and that agitation that's, I think everyone has been taking note of, that Justin just doesn't look like he's enjoying this right now. And at some point, that's got to change for him and the sake of the entire team.
How likely do you think it is that Fields totally regresses and turns into, I guess, what we would say a bust? I mean, is that, where do you see that right now when you watch Fields and when you see his demeanor in press conferences? Do you see him on that path yet, or is there still some hope?
No, yeah, I wouldn't say he's on that path yet, but I would certainly say that path's entrance is still open, right? And that the Bears have to make sure he doesn't get on that path. And that's sort of this pivotal point right now in his development here. Even though it is, 4 games into a new system with a new regime, you got to be very conscious of that, particularly in a market like this where the avalanche of criticism isn't going to slow down if you continue to struggle, right? Like people are worn out of being told that they need to be patient while they figure out the starting quarterback position, right? It's been 30 years. They just went through this experience with Mitch Trubisky. It didn't work out. And so that's not Justin's fault. It's not Luke Getsy's fault. It's not Matt Eberflus's fault, but it also isn't going away. And so they have to understand the dynamic that they're in. And that's all part of this thing. Look, like Justin has playmaking ability. It's just got to start showing up more frequently on game days. You have to be able to put together a drive in which, 2 or 3 plays are on script games. Like so many of their plays right now are the tuck and run, scramble, off script stuff that you got to start getting stuff to be unlocked within the confines of the system you're running and within the scheme of the playbook.
The Bears fans gave Mitch Trubisky 4 years. Are you willing to give 4 years to Justin Fields as well to prove that he's the guy for this team?
I don't know that I was willing to give Mitch the 4th year, right? Like I think I knew at that point coming out of 2019 that we had seen enough that, this was headed where it was headed. And where it headed was Mitch lost his job. And then Mitch went to Buffalo, and then Mitch got a new job in Pittsburgh, and then he lost that one, right? And so the league let us know where they think of of Mitch Trubisky the way that we already kind of knew that. And so, listen, I've told people a lot that if you're expecting a definitive answer on who Justin Fields is as a quarterback at the end of 2022 in a positive light, you're crazy. I think the only definitive verdict we can have at the end of this season is that he ain't it, and that's going to take 3 more months of this kind of struggle where you say, man, it's overwhelming evidence. He just went through an entire second year without showing any progress, without any growth. Now you've got to turn your eyes forward. But I would expect somewhere in here, there's going to be flashes of brilliance, right? And it's going to change the tone for a week, maybe 2. If we're all lucky, maybe 3. And then all of a sudden you're going to get to the end of the year and you're going to say, well, there's enough here to believe in. So let's give him the 3rd year. The 3rd year should be telling, right? And by the time you get to the end of the 3rd year and you've got to make decisions and figure out where you're going with your team, so I guess that was a long-winded answer to say, no, I'm not willing to give him 4, but I'll give him the 3rd and I'm not dead set on having to put my verdict in at the end of this season.
Dan Wiederer here on Sports Talk Chicago. Dan, what have you seen defensively from this Bears team?
There's some bright spots, and probably the brightest spot right now is Eddie Jackson. And seeing the resurgence of Eddie Jackson has been very promising for a guy that went 2 consecutive seasons without a pick. To have 3 in the first 4 games tells you, okay, Eddie Jackson still has ball skills. Eddie Jackson still has an awareness of the football field. Eddie Jackson is still good in space, and Eddie Jackson can still make plays. That's a bright spot. Roquan Smith has had his moments. Up front, I think you're looking at a defensive front that's not sturdy enough to consistently stop the run. The numbers bear that out. And even against the Giants team that the Bears knew was going to be one-dimensional and that they were going to just stack up and try to stop Saquon Barkley from beating him, he still ran for a $130, and Daniel Jones got out on you for 2 touchdowns and 49 yards in the first half alone. So they've got to find more talent and more depth to their defensive front to be able to be sturdier against the run. I would expect that would be a priority in both the draft and free agency next year to get some more firepower up there. And then you need to hope that some of the growing pains that guys like Kyler Gordon and Jaquan Brisker are experiencing now are beneficial long-term, right? That these guys are sturdy enough to handle those things, to grow, and then look back on these and say, man, I'm really glad I went through some of those rough patches as a rookie, because now I'm a playmaking starting standout.
How embarrassing were those 2 Daniel Jones touchdown runs?
Well, 2 breakdowns in 2 different ways. And you just say, boy, like somebody on your defense has to be aware, and you can't lose contain of the quarterback on the bootleg. Right. And it's just, this team doesn't have a real wide margin for error. And when you make mistakes like that, they lead to touchdowns, and those touchdowns lead to you getting beat. And so it's rough because you get to the end of the day and you say the Bears defense did only allow 20 points, right? And for the season, they've kept them in pretty much every game with the exception of maybe the Green Bay game. So they're keeping them around, right, to win games. And that's the formula right now. But man, you got to make sure that you take care of the basics. And those two Daniel Jones touchdown runs where there were some basics missed, John. And then you see where it ends. It ends with Daniel Jones celebrating in the end zone.
Didn't look like they were employing the hits approach there. I think that was anti-hits approach, right?
Anti-hits, and anti-hits also on the fumble recovery effort when Justin fumbled, right? I mean, there's a loose ball on the field and there hasn't been a whistle blown. And yes, it's a weird play for that fumble to come from behind. Right. But still, if you're a football player in Matt Eberflus's system, you understand what they're grading you on, and they're grading you on effort to the whistle. And when you don't show effort to the whistle, and then that lack of effort results in a turnover, that's a colossal critical no-no, felony in the hits principle law book, right?
What do you think about Matt Eberflus as a coach?
Still trying to figure it out, John. I really am. I'm still trying to figure out what the magic sauce is here. I think that there was a good surge and a notable surge of initial buy-in and belief from this team during the spring and summer. That comes with most new coaches, right? I've said it before that Mark Trestman had that, and John Fox had that, and Matt Nagy had that, and it didn't work out for any of them. And so my concern or curiosity more so is to see how Matt Eberflus is able to steady this team when they're 3-6 or 4-8, and we get later in the year and the hits principle isn't paying dividends in the win column, and players are starting to get physically and emotionally fatigued. How do you get them back up to see the long view of this, right? And that these are standards that need to be set so we can be successful up the road. There's a lot in front of Matt the rest of the year, and obviously, he doesn't get a pass just because he's a defensive-minded coach for Justin's development, right? Like, you've put together the staff to oversee Justin's development, and so you are going to be held accountable for Justin's progress. It feels like we're in this weird zone because we knew Matt Nagy had his hands all over Mitch Trubisky, right? Here you're like, well, Matt kind of does, but it's more Luke team. Well, no, Matt Eberflus is the head coach of this football team. He's got to be held accountable for Justin's development as well. And so we got to see something from him in that regard as well. And he's never done it, right? He's never developed a quarterback at any stage of his coaching career for obvious reasons.
Do you trust in him in polls to lead this team forward? Do you trust in the plan so far?
If I'm a Bears observer, I only offer trust if trust has been earned, right? And this organization has given you all the evidence you need to know that you shouldn't trust anyone, right? Like they haven't had a run of sustained success probably since you were born, John, to be quite honest with you. I think their last stretch of 3 consecutive winning seasons was in the late 80s, right? I was just a kid back then. So look, you have to earn trust from folks in Chicago with the track record of failure that this organization has had. I certainly am willing to offer them the benefit of the doubt 4 games into their first season and continue seeing their philosophy and their approach play out. But yeah, I don't know that I'd be willing to do the trust fall, if you will, and stand on the edge of a table and fall backwards into their arms just yet.
When do you expect them to be good again? I mean, next year there's going to be tons of cap space. You would presume there's going to be money spent. Is that kind of the timeline, or what do you think?
You would hope that they could be competitive in 2023, right? That they can go out with draft capital and free agent money to spend and add talent to this roster. Now, again, so much of this is hinging on what does Justin Fields do with the rest of his second season? How much growth does he make? Does he look like the answer at quarterback? Is he a guy that can win games for you as opposed to just being a guy who's along for the ride when you win? And so they've got answers or they've got questions to answer really in the next 13 games and 14 weeks here. And it isn't going to be easy, right? Like that's why I think your initial question about the Giants game is so poignant, because it's like, this is what you're up against most weeks. There is no easy game on your schedule, right? The easiest game on your entire schedule was the Texans at home, and you needed a last second field goal to win, right? So that's what you're up against for the rest of the way. There's going to be no breather here. And so the Bears have to understand that. And until they show significant progress from the way they're playing now, I'm not willing to raise the bar for 2023 too high, because I need to see more from guys that you hope will be long-term playmakers.
Dan Wiederer still here on Sports Talk Chicago. Dan, a few more questions before we finish up. First off, the score. You're now a contributor there. You're hosting the new podcast. How did it happen?
Yeah, really wonderful opportunity, John. And thanks for asking about that, because it's been fun to reunite with David Haw, who was my colleague for many years at the Chicago Tribune before he went into sports talk radio. And we've had just such a good time getting this thing off the ground. I think we're both feeling like there's so much growth ahead of us to take this podcast to new levels, but it's been so refreshing to just kind of revive those conversations, right? And to be able to talk football. David's football mind is as sharp as any you're going to get in the city. And so to be able to exchange thoughts, 2-3 times a week has been a lot of fun. And I a lot of credit to Mitch Rosen and Odyssey and everyone else that has opened the doors for us to give this a whirl. And so let's see where we can take it, because it's been a lot of fun. And hopefully, like I say, I can tell people all the time, hopefully the content will be more positive at some point, right? Like I would love to be able to have people tell me, hey, Dan, you're being too positive. I don't get a lot of that right now. And you understand why.
Why do you think you get those comments? I mean, I know why, but why do you think you get all those comments?
Accusing me of being negative, you mean?
Right.
Because I cover a football team that loses every year, right? I mean, it's pretty simple. I'm in my 10th season. I haven't covered a playoff win. I've documented that so many times. I've only seen one winning season, in the first 9. This one isn't ending there. I know where this is shoots and ladders game. We're going down the chute at some point on this board. We're not getting to the end there. So, you can only cover what's in front of you. And that's what I tell people all the time. Look, like you see this book above me that I wrote about North Carolina basketball winning the national championship in 2009. That's a pretty fun book to read, because I covered a team that won a championship, right? And so coverage of championship teams is naturally more positive than coverage of mediocrity and bottom feeding teams who are constantly rebooting. So that's my answer to that one.
You were with the Vikings too, right? How was that experience compared to now being here with the Bears?
Yeah, 2 years with the Vikings, and the second one was Adrian Peterson's MVP season, which resulted in the Vikings getting kind of a surprise playoff berth. Now, they lost their playoff opener to the Packers. Christian Ponder was their starting quarterback at the time, and he was hurt for the playoff game, so they had to go to Lambeau Field with Joe Webb as their starting quarterback. John, you know how that one ended up. It did not end up well for the Vikings, but that was a really fun season to watch that team sort of believe, to watch Adrian Peterson, remember, not just win the MVP award, but win the MVP award after tearing his ACL on Christmas Eve of the previous season. I mean, the timeline for his recovery and what he did that year was physically remarkable. And so that was a really cool year to be a part of. The one that I compare in Chicago is 2018, right? Like we had a lot of fun in 2018. The Bears won 12. They won a division. They got on that heater to end the year, where I think they won 9 of their final 10 in the regular season. And, you get on runs like that, and all of a sudden there's a surge of energy that you can't hold it back. And so I'm waiting. I'm waiting at the bus stop for the next one that the Bears want to put us on.
Dan, before we finish up today, last question. What's the ugliest game you've had to rewatch?
Man, you needed to give me like 4 days notice on that one so I could go back through, because the list of nominees, John, it's so long, right? Like, I'm thinking back in my head to the Jimmy Clausen start in Seattle when the Bears had 10 possessions and punted 10 times, right? Like that wasn't exactly a real thriller to go back through. That one pops off the top of my head. Obviously, the Cleveland game last year and Justin's first start was a disaster as far as game plan and execution and production and everything that goes with that. But that's just 2 off of a menu that's like, it's like one of those Cheesecake Factory menus. There's like 32 pages on it, and you're trying to figure out what to pick.
Well, Dan, I appreciate the time, and I'm hoping personally that we see some winning football here in Chicago for your sake more than anybody's, because it must be tough covering a team like this.
I appreciate you looking out for me. I think everyone would be happy if even if we could, none of us are of the delusion that this is going to end with the Bears in the playoffs this season, but let's have a couple week run where there's a couple really positive stories, and we can actually go into a Wednesday press conference and ask Justin Fields about his second touchdown pass in a game, right? Wouldn't that be a cool thing to be able to throw out there? So let's see where they can take it, John.
Always appreciate it, Dan, for sure. Thank you so much. Looking forward to your coverage in the Tribune and with the Score, and looking forward to catching up again soon, too.
You got it. Thanks, John. Always enjoy it.